Okay, so today is Gaur Purnima. We have a short amount of time, so we're not going to take a whole lot of time to go through this. And children are welcome, by the way. Happy children noises are welcome. Unless they're screaming. If they're screaming, you need to take them out. But if they're just happy, that's fine. You know, there's never been a religious organization that has survived without children. It's never happened. Okay. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is actually Krishna in the mood of Srimati Radharani. So we could say, on the one hand, that God knows everything. It's one of the definitions of God. Yes? That He knows everything. But might that not be rather boring? If there was nothing more to learn, imagine that. Wouldn't that be boring? You know, each of us is particularly interested in learning more about ourselves. Correct? Like one of the most popular things on the internet is people taking little quizzes. You know, what Disney character are you? Or what ketchup brand are you? Or all these stupid things. But why are people interested in that? Because they're hoping to find out something more about themselves, right? So one of the big reasons people go to palm readers and astrologers and therapists, and let me find out more about myself. It's hard to find out everything about your own self, isn't it? And always finding out more about someone, psychologists have learned, is one thing that keeps a relationship alive. If you have some relationship with someone, and you feel that you already know every single thing about them, the relationship tends to die. It's discovering something new and something exciting that keeps a relationship dynamic. It's a mystery. One of the best teaching techniques is if at the beginning of a class you set up some kind of mystery that you don't solve until the end. and then everybody will stay. The students will even stay after the bell rings. So we're like this because we're part of Krishna, and he likes a mystery. So he has mysteries also about himself. He's always learning more about himself because he is dynamic. Srila Prabhupada explains that God knows everything, but yet then he's always expanding. And so then he's learning more about his expansion. And his knowledge of himself is always kind of running to keep up with himself. So Krishna was wondering, what's so wonderful about me? What is it that Srimati Radharani loves about me? What sweetness is she tasting? What happiness is she tasting? And again, you could say, well, how is it he doesn't know? But he's excited to find out more about himself. And in one sense, he's asking and answering this question about himself perpetually. Because to find out this answer, he comes, instead of appearing by the Yamuna, he appears by the Ganga as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna who wanted to experience himself from Radharani's perspective. And because he's eternally existing as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, therefore he's eternally asking these questions about himself and eternally finding the answers to them and eternally still asking. Actually, it says that when Krishna and Radharani are together, that his love for her is always increasing, and as his love for her increasing, he becomes more beautiful. As he becomes more beautiful, her love for him increases. As her love for him increases, she becomes more beautiful. Aren't people beautiful when they're in love? Isn't that one of the ways you can tell that somebody's in love, right? All of a sudden they're glowing, isn't it? Right? It's why practically every bride looks beautiful, even if, technically she's not so beautiful. Correct? Right? From a technical point of view, you're like, meh, 3 or 4 out of 10. But on her wedding day, it's like, because she's glowing, and you're like, wow, she's beautiful. So that principle operates with God. That they're always increasing in beauty and always increasing in knowledge. So this is perpetual dynamic. Now, we always say that God is merciful, but God's compassion, the Lord's compassion, is a person, and that person is Srimati Radharani. She is the person of his compassion. So although he's always compassionate, unlimitedly so, when he takes on her mood, he becomes unlimitedly more unlimitedly so. You can add infinity to infinity. Yeah? Right? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnat Udachyate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate. The unlimited can get unlimitedly bigger. So when Krishna is in the mood of Radharani, he becomes even more compassionate. There was a very famous experiment, and if I had known I was going to give this class, I would have had time to look it up and tell you the exact names and dates. But I didn't, so I don't. It was a psychological experiment. I think one of them's name is Guilford, I think. Anyway, it was done by a male researcher, and he was trying to find out what is the source of morality and ethics in human beings. So he did some experiments, and he came to the conclusion that the origin of our sense of morality and ethics is our sense of justice. Well, some years later, a female researcher looked at the methodology of his research. It was very well known and very much cited in all the studies of psychology, sociology. And she said, this researcher only studied men. She said, suppose I study women. And when she studied women, she found out that the source of morality and ethics was not a sense of justice, but a sense of mercy. And this particular dynamic that, we're making a generalization, obviously, individuals are individuals, but that men have more of a sense of justice as the basis of their morality, and women have more of a sense of mercy as the basis of their morality. This applies also to the Lord. This applies also to the Lord. That Krishna in his original mood is like, you know, I'll help you whatever you want to do. You want to go to heaven? I'll give you advice for that. You want to go to hell? I'll give you advice for that. Seriously, Prabhupada says that in a purport in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, I am seated ever as neutral. Although he's the best friend, Suridam Sarvabhutanam, his position is neutrality. Although Prabhupada does say that when we want to come to the material world, Krishna tries to convince us not to, and only lets us come because we insist upon it. But Radharani's mood is compassion. And so when the Lord has that mood, he's full of compassion. And he's coming and begging people. Like Prabhupada said, as Krishna, he says, Sarva Dharman Prachaja. You surrender to me, then I'll take care of you. And Lord Chaitanya isn't giving this precondition. Doesn't matter. You surrender to me, you don't surrender to me. Come, chant Hare Krishna. Experience Krishna Prema. So therefore we have this prayer. We can say this together. Namo Mahavadanaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gora Tivse Namaha. We can say the English together. O most munificent incarnation, you are Krishna himself, appearing as Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You have assumed the golden color of Srimati Radharani, and you are widely distributing pure love of Krishna. We offer our respectful obeisances unto you. So now we're going to go into a meditation on a song. It's actually the song that we sang this morning before we talked about Mahaprabhu's discussion with Ramananda Roy. As I mentioned this morning, but I think many of you were not here this morning. This particular song, when I used to live in the Boston Temple, we would sing every Saturday before Chaitanya Charitamrita class. And I just really love this song. When I used to run a preschool for children aged 2 to 5, I taught them all this song. Huh? So Paramakaruna is the supremely merciful of all the incarnations, of all the manifestations of the Lord. Here he is in a mood of utmost mercy. There is no other incarnation who is so kind. Now, of course, we have a tendency in this world, many of us, not to be very merciful ourselves. I was recently aware of a situation where one person I know made a serious mistake. And many of the people who knew this person immediately were not merciful. Immediately. Oh, you've made a serious mistake. Terrible. Never going to speak to you again. In my own life, there was a time I made a very serious mistake with a building contractor for our school. I didn't review the contract properly before I signed it, and I ended up in a very serious mistake that I could have avoided easily had I just taken a few more minutes to be careful. And I dearly paid for the mistake. I had to go through a court case, and it was for 1 year. I was entangled in a court case because I made that mistake. But what really impressed me was that the other people who were also affected by my mistake didn't blame me. Never. They never said, "This is terrible, you were irresponsible. Why didn't you take another 10 minutes? Why didn't you see a lawyer at the beginning?" All of which I hope I've learned my lesson and will never do that again. But nobody condemned me. Even though they could have, they had a right to, and I had actually done something foolish. But the fact that they didn't condemn me indebted me to them. I thought, these are my real friends. They're sticking by me as I'm fixing my oversight. So we have such a tendency in this world, and I think it's increasing and increasing and increasing, that when people do something wrong, when they make a mistake, we want to jump all over them, we want to tell everybody, we want to broadcast it all over social media. And many times it's not even true, right? Later on you have to go, oops, it wasn't even true. We'll ruin somebody's reputation over a rumor. So if we want the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one thing we need to be is also merciful and also kind. We should remember that none of us is without fault. Who here can say they've never done anything wrong their whole life? Well, it's a shame, huh? Maybe if we have a newborn baby in the room. So to have a mood of mercy and kindness and compassion, that is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mood. Of course, sometimes he was very heavy with people. There are some people, like Junior Haridas, that he was very strict on to set an example. But in general, he's very kind. Doesn't matter who you are or what you are, you can come to Krishna Prema. Now the Bengali here is very nice. Saba means all, and Sara, we had the word Sara in this morning's class over and over again. It means the top. Shiromani, Shiro is the head, Mani means jewel. Like we'll say the crown jewel, the jewel you wear on your head. So of all the incarnations, this is the top crown jewel of all of them. Now you could say, well, doesn't that refer to Krishna himself? But this is Krishna himself. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not some partial manifestation. He's fully Krishna. Therefore, he is the most complete manifestation of the Lord. And Mahaprabhu showed this when he displayed his six-armed form. Now, generally, Mahaprabhu showed himself as a devotee and did not display that he was actually God. In the story we were telling this morning of Lord Chaitanya's talks with Ramananda Roy, what we didn't talk about this morning was that at the end of those talks, Ramananda Roy said, you know, I'm looking at you and I think you're Krishna. When I see you, I see Krishna. And Lord Chaitanya said, oh, you're a great devotee. You see Krishna everywhere. And Srila Prabhupada, in commenting and purporting that verse, said how the devotee sees Krishna as the light in all luminous objects, as the heat in fire, as the fire of their digestion, as the air they're breathing. So the great devotee sees Krishna everywhere. But here he was seeing Krishna personally. Yes? And so Ramananda Roy said, stop playing with me. Show me who you really are. And then Mahaprabhu showed Ramananda Roy, he's Radha and Krishna combined. But he also has this form where he has 2 arms as Krishna, 2 arms as Ram, and 2 arms as a sannyasi. And he showed this form to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, this Sadbhuj form, and you can see a painting of this form in Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house. Then with Ramananda Roy, after showing Ramananda Roy that he was Krishna, he then showed Ramananda Roy, well, I'm not really just Krishna. I'm Krishna in the mood of Radharani. So while there's innumerable incarnations of the Lord, Matsya, Varaha, Nrsimha, Kurma, so many, more than the waves of the ocean. It's so wonderful here. We're so close to the ocean, right? I walked there today. I saw Aniruddha Prabhu. I said, I'm going to the ocean. He said, well, it's just a bay. I said, no, don't ruin it for me. Just let me believe it's the ocean. But wave after wave after wave in the ocean. So in the same way, Krishna has unlimited. Advaitam achyutam anadim ananta rupam. Unlimited. That means his form is unlimited. He has a form, but it's not like my form has a limit. He has an unlimited form, and he has unlimited forms. But most of Krishna's forms don't display all of his personality or all of his qualities. Just like for ourselves, we don't generally display all of our qualities to someone. We kind of pick and choose, depending on who we're with and what we're trying to do. With Krishna, everything, Akila Rasamrita Murti, everything, the same with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is a great secret about the system of Bhakti Yoga that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has brought. Keval means only. Ananda means bliss. It is only blissful. Now you might say, well, Urmila, I don't know how long you've been in Krishna consciousness, but I've been hanging out for a while, and it's not only blissful. I mean, there's sometimes problems with the other devotees, and then there's my mind. And then, have you noticed all the anartas that come up from the heart? So, that's a fact. In fact, I could say that had I known when and I'm never sure if I should tell people this or not, because nobody told me. And I kind of wish they had told me, and I'm kind of glad they hadn't told me. If you seriously practice Krishna consciousness, something will happen that you probably don't like. And that is, you'll become aware that there's evil in your heart. You'll become aware of selfishness and cruelty that you really didn't think was there. Now, if that hasn't happened to you, you haven't gone deep enough. Because that will happen. It's the part of Krishna consciousness called anartha nivritti. Most of us in this world walk around thinking, I'm pretty good, I got it together. I mean, okay, I do some bad things, but my motives are great. You know, I've got good intention, good motives, good heart, I'm a wonderful person. Yeah, I make some mistakes. Do you know even serial killers think this way about themselves? Seriously, they really do. They really, really, seriously, they do. There was this one heavy-duty serial killer who used to just get, random people, tie them up, torture them, and kill them. And his daughter was writing about how she came to grips with learning that her father was like that. And she said he wrote her a letter from prison saying, well, I'm a nice guy, I just made a few mistakes. I'm like, whoa. We have the great devotees who write these prayers saying, I'm the most sinful of all sinners. And I'm thinking, how can they think that? What did they ever do? And I think, how could I say a prayer like that with sincerity? I haven't killed anybody. I haven't burned down a building. I did steal something from school when I was 5. But I haven't done any criminal activities. How could I think I'm the most sinful of all sinners? But something happens, my dear friends, when you go seriously into a spiritual process, and that you start seeing that my motives really aren't so great. What's driving me is nasty. And that's painful to look at. It is. I'm not going to fool you. It's very painful. But you know what? It's a lot of fun to get rid of it. It is the most fun, exciting, joyful, liberating thing to get rid of that stuff. And unfortunately, you can't get rid of it unless you know it's there. Generally. What the Christians call the dark night of the soul, most people misunderstand it, but the dark night of the soul, which was a term made up by St. John of the Cross, is when that stuff gets rid of without your knowing it. It's gotten rid of while you sleep, kind of. Like you just kind of, oh, that's gone. Wow, I didn't even know it was there, and it's gone. So a lot of our anarthas, the Lord is going to take out without our being aware of them. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? But there are some things we're going to have to face. So why is it said Kevalananda Kanda when there's some of these things that we are going to have to face and let go of voluntarily and say to the Lord, yes, I relinquish this. You can remove this from me. Why is it still called Kevalananda Kanda in that case? Because when we do that properly, that process is also very joyful. It's also very joyful. If we want to become a good anything, if you want to become a good writer, you want to become a good tennis player, if you want to become good at anything, you're going to go to a teacher or a coach, and one of the things that teacher or coach is going to do is surface what you're doing wrong, isn't it? And if you really want to become a good whatever it is, then that will be a happy experience, not a distasteful one. What is it that makes it painful to surface these nasty things in our heart is only and solely our pride. That we were convincing ourselves that there was nothing there. So if one takes up this process with humility, then even that surfacing and getting rid of the anarthas is Kevalananda Kanda. Now, on an external level, we can say it's Kevalananda Kanda because the process itself, singing, dancing, feasting, right? If you want to become really serious in most religious practices, then you have to go live in a monastery where there's only unsalted bread and thin soup. And you take a vow of silence. Right? Have you ever seen there was a nice film a devotee showed me about this European monastery where all the monks took a vow of silence, except 1 hour on Sunday, when they'd go out and play games and talk to each other. And I'm looking at this and thinking, oh. I mean, except when they were praying, but they couldn't talk to each other. Like you're working in the kitchen with another brother, you can't talk to him, you know. They would just get their meals put under the door in their room like they were in prison. So, you know, if you want to be a serious adherent of most religions, it's really serious and austere and painful and difficult, which is why most people don't do it. Huh? But if you want to be a serious practitioner of Krishna consciousness, then you have to be joyful all the time. In fact, Prabhupada says without being joyful, you cannot make advancement. So without embracing joy constantly, one cannot really practice Krishna consciousness. And everything we're doing is very joyful. By the way, I should mention that this use of the Bengali Bhai doesn't deny the female half of the population. And that the Bengalis use the word Bhai like we in English often use the word guys. Like, come on guys. It can mean everybody. I learned that from a Bengali scholar. I didn't make that up. So Lochan Das Thakur, who's writing this song, he says, please worship Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. They're practically speaking, giving away this supremely joyful process of ultimate mercy for free. Why not worship them? We are worshiping, or so-called worshiping, so many people in this world, movie stars, rock stars, our boss, our government, sports figures. So many people we're idolizing, giving our adulation to. Why not to the Lord in His most merciful aspect? Now, where are we going to get this faith? We're going to get this faith from experience. Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmam. One can experience this Krishna consciousness for oneself. Ultimately, it's not just a question of believing in the scriptures, believing in the guru, believing in the devotees. Prabhupada one time asked the devotees, if someone says to you, why are you following this process? They said, well, Prabhupada, because you said so. He said, oh, that's blind faith. But why are you following? Oh, it says in the scriptures. Oh, okay, very nice. But why are you following? What's your experience? So I want to ask everybody here, unless you just walked in this temple for the very first time and you've only been here for 2 minutes, but for everybody else, have you ever eaten some prasadam that had a taste that was inexplicable by the material ingredients? Who's ever had that experience with prasadam? Every day. Woo! I like to tell the story. I was in Puerto Rico, and I had seen the devotee make these cookies, or do you call them biscuits, like the British? Biscuits, okay. Biscuits to us in America are an entirely different creature. They're like a scone. But anyway, she had made these biscuits, aka cookies. Simple, simple, simple. Butter, sugar, flour, little salt, maybe little vanilla. Simple, simple. And we had gone to a university program. We were giving out the cookies, biscuits. I never had one because I was answering questions. Out of the 120 people there, at least 40 of them came up to me and said, "Oh, what was in those cookies?" Yes? Or we're in a kirtan, and maybe the kirtan, the singer may not have the most beautiful voice on the planet. The people playing the instruments, they'd never be able to cut a CD. There's a lot more beautiful music from an auditory perspective that we could hear someplace else. But we may get an experience in the kirtan that we cannot explain by the expertise of the singer or the music. Who's had that kind of experience? Or you read the scriptures, you read Prabhupada's books. I mean, I've read so many books in my life. When I was a kid, I used to read at least a book every day. So many books, and I've read so many books on philosophy and history, the psychology, the different topics that are covered in Prabhupada's books, sociology. But sometimes we're reading Prabhupada's books, and we get some wonderful experience that can't be explained just because of the logic and just because of the writing style that goes beyond the poetry of the writing and the intellectual points being made. Who's had that experience reading Prabhupada's books? And who's had some experience in service that can't be explained by what you're doing? Sometimes I'm cleaning a toilet and I'm feeling this happiness. It's like, what? Can you imagine, to say to your kid, "Oh, grow up and be a toilet cleaner"? It is such an ecstatic experience. But who's ever been doing some service where you had an experience that couldn't be explained by the nature of the service itself? All right, that's where our faith should come from. Therefore, we should serve Chaitanya Nityananda with this firm conviction and faith based on our own experience that we're here dealing with something that is not material. It's not materially explained. All right, there is one price. We have to give up selfishness and pride. What sense gratification means, it doesn't mean whether or not I have a nice car or whether I have a nice piece of clothing. That's not what it means. It means, do I have a mood to try to enjoy the energy of God as if I were God? Am I trying to make myself the center of the universe? And that has to be given up. I mean, frankly, I'm not the center of the universe. Anybody here the center of the universe? So what we're giving up is only something false. And what does one have to do? Just to chant Hare Krishna. When Mahaprabhu was very small, he would cry and cry and cry and cry and cry unless people were chanting. Maybe have you seen the video? There's one devotee's son that was also like that. Any of you saw that video? I know that family personally. So Mahaprabhu was like that. He just wants us to say the name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh, let's try to do this again. And let's involve not only our mouth, but our mind. Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Let's try this again, and let's involve our mouth, our mind, and our heart. I'd like us to remember sometime when we really just felt some attachment to Krishna, or one of those times we were talking about where you felt something that couldn't be materially explained. Can we go back to that time? And with that feeling in our heart and chanting the mantra in our mind, let's also chant with our mouth. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I love this picture. It's such a funny story. So Mahaprabhu used to only see the deities from the back of the temple room. by the Garuda Stamba, because when he'd first come to Jagannath Puri, he went right up to the deities and he fainted. And it was a whole scene, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had to take the Lord to his house. And so Lord Chaitanya decided that so he wouldn't cause a disturbance next time, he'd stand in the back. So while he's standing at the back by the Garuda Stamba, there was this elderly lady who came in, and there were a lot of crowds, and she couldn't see the deity, right? Who here has been to India? Okay. Who here has been to our ISKCON temple in Mayapur Dham? All right. Who has tried to see Lord Nrsingadev during the morning program and failed? There's so much crowds, right? I mean, you can see Radha Madhav and the Astasakis because they're up high, and the Panchatattvikas, they're up high, but Nrsingadev's not. So unless you're A, a male, and B, you happen to be all the way on the left side of the temple room, you can't see him. I mean, you can kind of see maybe his face sometimes when people sort of shift one way or the other, right? And you're seeing the guy with the camera who's standing up on the platform, and then you're really jealous, right? You're like, could I pretend I'm taking a picture? Maybe I could pretend I'm with Mayapur TV and get up there with this guy, you know? You just can't see him. You have to come back later in the day. A lot of people just give up and look at him on the screens. But I think, gosh, I might as well just be home if I'm going to do that, you know? So there was this elderly lady who really wanted to see Jagannath. And there were all these people pressing. She couldn't see him. And there was no stand for a camera because there wasn't a cameraman then anyway. So she didn't even have an option. So she was so eager to see him that she just started climbing without thinking about what she was climbing on. She was actually climbing on Lord Chaitanya. Now, in Indian society, in Vedic society, the concept, they have the real concept about heads and feet, which I don't think we have so much in Australia, but there's this concept about like your feet are really low because they're on the ground, because they're literally low, but they're kind of really low. And so you don't put your feet on things. Like Srila Prabhupada corrected a devotee Hayagriva for moving something with his foot. And he just couldn't relate. Like, why can't I move things with my feet? Right? But in Indian culture, you don't, touching something with your feet is really, really disrespectful. Huh? So what to speak of climbing on somebody? And what to speak of putting your feet on the Lord? Like, you're never supposed to put your feet on the Lord. Right? There's a whole other story we could tell if we had time about the gopis with their foot dust. So if you know it, you can remember it, but I don't have time to tell it. So you certainly wouldn't put your feet on the Lord. Now, of course, she was putting her feet on the Lord so she could see the Lord, and she didn't realize she was putting her feet on the Lord so she could see the Lord. So as she climbs up, Lord Chaitanya's assistant, Govinda, get down, get down, get down. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And then, you know, her ecstasy kind of broke, and then she's like, oh, what am I doing? And she got down. I'm sure she profusely apologized. And Lord Chaitanya looked at Govinda and said, I wish I was that eager to see Krishna. So, my dear friends, that does not mean that we should be disrespectful and excuse it in the name of eagerness. That's not what it means. But it does mean we should have that level of eagerness that we honestly forget about everything else. So when Mahaprabhu was going to Vrindavan, in those days there were real jungles in India. Not so many jungles anymore, but there were real jungles. And there were tigers and lions in the jungles. And as he passed through, he got those tigers and elephants and deer to dance and to chant. And they were dancing with each other. There's a very famous painting called The Peaceable Forest. Who has seen that painting? A very, very famous piece of art. Anyone seen that painting, The Peaceable Forest? What do they teach you guys in school nowadays? I don't know. This is your homework. Home fun. Look it up. The Peaceable Forest. So it's supposed to be showing paradise, where the lion lies down with the lamb. It shows a lion and a lamb together. And so this is the Judeo-Christian idea that in paradise the lion and the lamb will lie down with each other. So that's very nice. We take it a step further and we say the lion and the lamb are going to dance and sing together. We were talking this morning about Siddhanta, yeah? Those of you who are here this morning. So we take this a little step further. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was getting all the animals to sing and dance. So we might not be able to get animals to sing and dance, but at least we should try to get other people to sing and dance. And Mahaprabhu would get the stones to melt. Now the stone we really want to melt is right here. Our hesitancy to love. Our hesitancy to love. Because we know that if we really love, we become fully vulnerable and we give everything. So although we know that love of God is the goal, at least intellectually we know. And although we're all aiming for love of God, there's still something that holds back, isn't there? Some fear. What would happen if I completely loved God? And that holding back is a kind of calcification. It's a kind of stone. But Lord Chaitanya melts that stone and says, it's okay. You can actually love. You'll be safe. You'll have everything. There's nothing to fear. And you can say, but I don't see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu now. What will I do? And here Lochan Das says, you just hear about him and this will happen. I was saying earlier that what prevents us from having full joy in the process of purification is pride. And here we see the deep humility of the devotee. Please, my dear friends, don't think of this humility as something painful. It's what allows us to feel joy in purification and love. In fact, you can't love without humility. You can't even love a dog. You can't even love your child or your spouse without some humility. What to speak of loving God? Therefore, the devotee goes into this depth of humility so that they can have appreciation and joy of all of the gifts and the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This photograph is of Lord Chaitanya's lotus feet that were installed by Bhaktisiddhanta at Shaimakund. If any of you have been there, at Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Baitak. And my family and I have the privilege, we organize people who clean there every day. So in this mood, and only in this mood of humility, can we actually ask for the mercy and love of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So are you ready for the Abhishek? Right now? Okay. So we'll stop here then. Thank you very much. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai.